She crashed his wedding and became the bride. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The air inside St. Andrew's Cathedral shimmered with golden light, the kind that made diamonds gleam brighter and secrets harder to hide. Hundreds of guests waited, cameras ready, the string quartet tuning their instruments for what was supposed to be the wedding of the year. At the altar stood Ethan Hale, the 32-year-old CEO of Hale Industries, the man whose last name alone could move markets. His tailored black suit fit like it was sculpted for him, every movement precise, controlled. But behind that calm exterior, a single text burned in his phone: "I cannot do this." The bride had vanished 10 minutes before the ceremony. In the chaos backstage, assistants whispered, phones rang, the wedding planner nearly fainted. And then, just as the organ began the first note of the wedding march, the heavy church doors swung open. A young woman stumbled inside, breathless, clutching a small wooden box to her chest. Her dress was plain, wrinkled, stained with coffee from the morning shift at the cafe across the street. Gasps rippled through the pews. For a moment, she looked lost, like she had stepped into the wrong life. "Excuse me please, I just need a second," she said softly, but her voice echoed in the vast hall. The guards moved, but Ethan raised his hand. Something in her trembling grip, in that desperate way she shielded the box, made him pause. She was out of place, yet unafraid. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low, steady. "Ava," she breathed, "I just came to take something that belongs to me. Then I will go." Before anyone could stop her, she walked straight toward the front, eyes flicking to the bouquet left behind by the runaway bride, to the gilded altar draped in white. The box in her hand slipped for a moment, and a silver key dangled from its ribbon. Ethan saw it glint under the chandelier and, inexplicably, felt something shift inside him. A storm of flashes went off. Guests whispered. The cameras zoomed in. Every second stretched. The scandal of the century was unfolding live. Ethan's mother's voice echoed from the front pew, sharp and panicked, "Do something, Ethan." He could almost hear the board members in his head calculating the stock fallout. His fiancée's family would withdraw from the merger, his reputation would drown in headlines before midnight. And then something wild, reckless slipped from his lips. "Wait," he said, stepping toward her. "If you want to save something tonight, Miss Ava, was it? Then save me." She blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Marry me. Right now. Think of it as a contract." A stunned silence swept through the cathedral. The priest froze mid-prayer. Ava's eyes widened as she looked up at this man who could buy a city block yet sounded like he was begging for a lifeline. "Are you insane?" she whispered. "Maybe," Ethan said, "but I am also out of options." The music faltered, the guests leaned forward, and in that one surreal moment, a barista with a coffee stain on her sleeve stood inches away from a billionaire groom who had just offered her his last desperate chance at redemption. Outside, church bells began to ring late, confused, but impossibly perfect. The city would remember that sound forever. The guests inside the cathedral were frozen, unsure if they were watching a disaster or the start of something that would be talked about for decades. Ava stood trembling, the small wooden box pressed against her chest, her mind spinning too fast to make sense of what the stranger in the expensive suit had just said. Ethan Hale, the billionaire groom with the calm voice and the sharp eyes, had just asked her to marry him. She looked at the faces turned toward her, hundreds of them, judging, whispering. She wanted to run, but the guards still blocked the only exit. "You cannot be serious," she said, her voice shaking. "Completely serious," Ethan replied. "You said you only came to take what belongs to you." "Well, so did I. My future. You could help me keep it." Before she could protest, his assistant rushed up, pale and frantic, whispering something about investors watching the live stream and a deal worth $2 billion about to collapse. Ethan's gaze never left Ava. "Say yes," he murmured, "and I will make sure no one touches that box of yours." "You have my word." Ava swallowed hard. She thought of the tiny apartment she would lose tonight, the overdue hospital bill with her late mother's name still printed on it, and the landlord's threats. Maybe this man was insane, but the look in his eyes was not cruel. It was desperate. Slowly, she nodded. The priest, still stunned, asked if this was a joke. Ethan simply said, "Continue." Gasps echoed. The music tried to restart but stumbled, awkward and uneven. A ring, meant for another woman, was slipped onto Ava's trembling hand. Cameras flashed. The guests, unsure if they should applaud or pray, sat speechless as the ceremony finished in a blur. When it was over, Ethan leaned toward her and whispered, "You just saved my company. Follow me." Within minutes, they were in the back seat of a black limousine, the city's chaos muffled behind tinted glass. Ava stared out the window, clutching her box like a shield. "You cannot just pick someone off the street and call it marriage," she said. Ethan adjusted his cufflinks, eyes forward. "You are right. That is why it will be a contract." "A contract," she repeated. 30 days. Appear with me at a few events. Pretend to be my wife until the press calms down. Then you walk away with a settlement generous enough to fix whatever that is you are holding on to." He nodded toward her box. "You think money fixes everything?" she asked quietly. "No," he said. "But it buys us time to find out what really does." The car turned through the iron gates of a mansion that looked more like a museum, all marble pillars and glowing chandeliers. Servants lined the hall as they entered, whispering behind polite smiles. Ava felt their eyes like weight on her back. In the study, Ethan opened a drawer and pulled out a sleek black folder. "These are the terms," he said. 5 rules. 1. This marriage is a legal arrangement, nothing more. 2. You will attend 5 public events with me. 3. Personal space will be respected. 4. Secrecy is absolute. 5. At the end of 30 days, we sign the annulment, and you receive a 1-year housing grant and a scholarship in your name. Ava blinked at him. "You already planned this?" "I always have a contingency plan," he said dryly. "So, do we have a deal?" She stared at the paper, then at his hand extended across the desk. The scent of cedar and rain clung to his suit. For a man who looked like he owned the world, he seemed strangely lonely. She hesitated, thinking of her mother's voice, the promise she had made at her bedside never to give up her dignity. "I will sign," she said, "on one condition. That box stays with me. Always." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Agreed." She signed. He countersigned. The pen trembled slightly in her grip, sealing a decision that would rewrite both their lives. As she placed the pen down, he said softly, almost to himself, "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Hale." The title sounded foreign, unreal. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, and the rain began to fall again, as if the heavens themselves had just witnessed a deal between 2 people who had no idea what kind of love they were about to create or destroy. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the endless marble floors of Hale Manor. Ava woke up in a guest room that looked bigger than the entire floor of her old apartment. Silk curtains danced in the breeze. A tray of breakfast fresh fruit, pastries, and coffee waited on the table. For a long time she just stared at it, not daring to touch anything, afraid one wrong move would break the illusion. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind like a fever dream. The wedding, the cameras, Ethan's steady voice offering her a contract instead of a promise. She looked down at the ring still on her finger. It felt heavy, not because of its value, but because of what it represented: 30 days of pretending. She took a deep breath and stepped out into the hallway. A housekeeper, nervous but polite, guided her to the east study. Ethan was already there, seated behind an oak desk, his laptop open and his tie already loosened. The man barely looked like he had slept. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," he said without looking up. "Do not call me that," she said quickly. "It feels wrong." He gave a small smirk. "Then let us stick to Ava and Ethan. Easier that way." On the desk lay a thick folder with the title Public Appearances and Media Strategy. "We have 5 major events to attend together," Ethan said. "The first one is the Hale Foundation Gala next week. You will need training how to walk, how to talk, how to handle the press." Ava crossed her arms. "I serve coffee for a living, Ethan. I think I can handle small talk." "Not when one wrong word can move stock prices," he replied dryly. The hours that followed felt like a crash course in a life she had never imagined. A stylist arrived with racks of dresses. A speech coach corrected her posture and her tone. She practiced smiling for cameras that were not there, learning how to balance grace and defiance. At one point, she accidentally tripped on the edge of a gown, crashing into a chair and sending a glass of water flying across the floor. Ethan looked up from his laptop, expression unreadable, then simply said, "We will add walking in heels to the list." Despite the dryness of his tone, Ava thought she saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Later, during a short break, she found herself alone in the vast kitchen. She placed her small wooden box on the counter and opened it. Inside lay a faded photo of her mother holding a baby her. Tucked beneath was the silver key, still tied with a ribbon. She traced it with her thumb, whispering softly, "Mom, I am not sure what I am doing, but I hope this does not make you ashamed of me." Unbeknownst to her, Ethan had paused by the doorway, watching silently. He noticed how her hands shook, how she touched the photo like it was something sacred. For a moment, the cold businessman in him faltered. He saw a woman fighting to survive, not someone chasing wealth. That night, as rain continued to fall, they sat across from each other at the long dining table. The distance between them felt wider than the table itself. The food was perfect, untouched. "You are not eating," Ava said finally. "Habit," Ethan replied. "In my world, dinner is just another meeting." "That sounds lonely." He met her gaze, startled by her honesty. "You get used to it," he said. "You should not have to." Silence stretched between them. Somewhere in that silence, something small and unspoken shifted. He noticed the way her eyes softened when she spoke, the way she did not flinch under his guarded tone. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a CEO, but as a man trying to hold everything together. After dinner, Ethan handed her a single page from the contract. "One more clause," he said. "You will stay here during the 30 days. It is safer for both of us." Ava nodded reluctantly. "Fine. But I have my own conditions." "And what is that?" "Do not treat me like a prop. If we are doing this, then we both act like real people." Ethan studied her, then nodded slowly. "Deal." When she walked back to her room, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at her looked almost unrecognizable, nervous, yet quietly determined. Somewhere between the lie she had agreed to and the life she had left behind, Ava realized something strange. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel completely powerless. And neither did he. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the endless marble floors of Hale Manor. Ava woke up in a guest room that looked bigger than the entire floor of her old apartment. Silk curtains danced in the breeze. A tray of breakfast, fresh fruit, pastries, and coffee waited on the table. For a long time she just stared at it, not daring to touch anything, afraid one wrong move would break the illusion. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind like a fever dream. The wedding, the cameras, Ethan's steady voice offering her a contract instead of a promise. She looked down at the ring still on her finger. It felt heavy, not because of its value, but because of what it represented: 30 days of pretending. She took a deep breath and stepped out into the hallway. A housekeeper, nervous but polite, guided her to the east study. Ethan was already there, seated behind an oak desk, his laptop open and his tie already loosened. The man barely looked like he had slept. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," he said without looking up. "Do not call me that," she said quickly. "It feels wrong." He gave a small smirk. "Then let us stick to Ava and Ethan. Easier that way." On the desk lay a thick folder with the title Public Appearances and Media Strategy. "We have 5 major events to attend together," Ethan said. "The first one is the Hale Foundation Gala next week. You will need training how to walk, how to talk, how to handle the press." Ava crossed her arms. "I serve coffee for a living, Ethan. I think I can handle small talk." "Not when one wrong word can move stock prices," he replied dryly. The hours that followed felt like a crash course in a life she had never imagined. A stylist arrived with racks of dresses, a speech coach corrected her posture and her tone. She practiced smiling for cameras that were not there, learning how to balance grace and defiance. At one point, she accidentally tripped on the edge of a gown, crashing into a chair and sending a glass of water flying across the floor. Ethan looked up from his laptop, expression unreadable, then simply said, "We will add walking in heels to the list." Despite the dryness of his tone, Ava thought she saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Later, during a short break, she found herself alone in the vast kitchen. She placed her small wooden box on the counter and opened it. Inside lay a faded photo of her mother holding a baby her. Tucked beneath was the silver key, still tied with a ribbon. She traced it with her thumb, whispering softly, "Mom, I am not sure what I am doing, but I hope this does not make you ashamed of me." Unbeknownst to her, Ethan had paused by the doorway, watching silently. He noticed how her hands shook, how she touched the photo like it was something sacred. For a moment, the cold businessman in him faltered. He saw a woman fighting to survive, not someone chasing wealth. That night, as rain continued to fall, they sat across from each other at the long dining table. The distance between them felt wider than the table itself. The food was perfect, untouched. "You are not eating," Ava said finally. "Habit," Ethan replied. "In my world, dinner is just another meeting." "That sounds lonely." He met her gaze, startled by her honesty. "You get used to it," he said. "You should not have to." Silence stretched between them. Somewhere in that silence, something small and unspoken shifted. He noticed the way her eyes softened when she spoke, the way she did not flinch under his guarded tone. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a CEO, but as a man trying to hold everything together. After dinner, Ethan handed her a single page from the contract. "One more clause," he said. "You will stay here during the 30 days. It is safer for both of us." Ava nodded reluctantly. "Fine. But I have my own conditions." "And what is that?" "Do not treat me like a prop. If we are doing this, then we both act like real people." Ethan studied her, then nodded slowly. "Deal." When she walked back to her room, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at her looked almost unrecognizable, nervous, yet quietly determined. Somewhere between the lie she had agreed to and the life she had left behind, Ava realized something strange. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel completely powerless. And neither did he. The night of the Hale Foundation Gala arrived like a storm dressed in diamonds. Cameras flashed outside the Grand Regent Hotel as limousines lined up under the golden archway. Inside the car, Ava sat perfectly still, the silk of her emerald gown whispering against her skin. It was the first event of their contract, and her heart pounded louder than the rain that drummed against the roof. Ethan adjusted his tie across from her, calm, unreadable, the picture of control. "Remember," he said, his tone clipped, "smile when you need to, speak only when necessary, and whatever happens do not let anyone see through this arrangement." Ava gave a small nod, forcing a steady breath. "I will do my best, Mr. Hale." His gaze softened for a fraction of a second. "Ethan," he corrected. "At least tonight." When the car doors opened, flashes of light exploded like fireworks. Reporters shouted questions, the crowd buzzed with curiosity. Who was the mysterious woman on Ethan Hale's arm? Ava's hand trembled slightly as he offered his arm. Ready? He asked. Not even a little, she whispered. He smirked faintly. Good. Honesty looks better on camera. Together, they stepped into the chaos. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers glimmered above a sea of gowns and tuxedos. Every eye seemed to follow them. Ava straightened her shoulders, recalling the hours of training, the lessons on posture, poise, and polite evasion. A woman with a voice like champagne approached, her smile sharp. Ethan, darling, and who is this? My wife, Ethan said smoothly, wrapping an arm around Ava's waist. The words sent a shock through her, heavier than she expected. The woman's eyes widened. Wife! My goodness, that was fast. Congratulations. Thank you, Ethan replied. We prefer quiet celebrations. Ava caught the woman's glance, curious, judging, but met it with a steady smile. As the night went on, she moved gracefully through conversations, nodding, smiling, saying just enough to seem natural. It was exhausting, yet every time she felt her mask slipping, Ethan was there, stepping in with a word or a glance that steadied her. During the dinner, a minor crisis struck. One of the servers tripped, sending a cascade of red wine spilling across the tablecloth straight toward a guest's gown. Without thinking, Ava grabbed a napkin, kneeling to blot the stain before it spread. I am so sorry, she said quickly. The woman blinked in surprise, clearly expecting someone else to handle it. It is fine, she said after a moment, taken aback by Ava's calm. Cameras captured the scene instantly. Mrs. Hale, the new wife, kind and composed. Ethan watched, a hint of pride flickering behind his usual restraint. Later, as the orchestra swelled and the guests began to dance, he led her to the balcony overlooking the city. The air was cooler there, the noise fading into distant music. You handled yourself well, he said quietly. You did not need me at all. That is not true, Ava replied. You were watching the whole time. He tilted his head, studying her. Is that a complaint? An observation, she said with a small smile. For a long moment, they simply stood there. The city lights reflected in his eyes, and something unguarded crossed his face, a flicker of loneliness, maybe even relief. Do you ever regret it? She asked suddenly. All of this. The money, the company, the life that feels built on appearances. He hesitated, his jaw tightening. Regret is a luxury I stopped affording a long time ago. That sounds sad, Ava murmured. It is realistic. She looked out at the skyline, the wind teasing loose strands of her hair. Maybe the difference between the two is smaller than you think. Ethan turned toward her, his expression unreadable. You are not what I expected, Ava. Neither are you, she said softly. Somewhere behind them, the orchestra shifted into a slower melody. For a fleeting second, it felt like the world outside disappeared, the press, the cameras, the lies. Just a man and a woman standing under the stars, each pretending for different reasons, yet both suddenly unsure where the act ended and the truth began. The night after the gala, the Hale mansion was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Ava could still hear the music in her head, the way Ethan's hand had lingered on her back when he led her off the dance floor, the way his eyes softened when he thought no one was watching. She could not sleep. When she finally stepped out onto the balcony, the city below glittered like a sea of fallen stars. Ethan was already there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. You should be resting, she said softly. So should you, he replied without turning. For a long time, neither spoke. The cool air brushed against them, carrying the scent of rain and jasmine from the garden below. I saw the news, she finally said. They love you tonight. He gave a quiet laugh that held no joy. They love an image. Tomorrow they will tear it apart and build a new one. That is how this world works. Ava leaned against the railing. Do you ever get tired of pretending? Every day, he said simply. She looked at him then, really looked. The man everyone called untouchable looked utterly human. His eyes, usually so composed, were tired in a way that went beyond lack of sleep. What about you? He asked suddenly. You have been pretending too. Playing my wife, smiling for cameras. Why did you say yes, that day? Ava hesitated. Because I needed to save something, she said quietly. A small box, a piece of my mother, and maybe a chance to start over. Ethan nodded, understanding more than he let on. That box means a lot to you. It is all I have left of her, Ava said. She used to tell me that kindness is a kind of currency. You spend it even when you are broke. He smiled faintly. Smart woman. She was, Ava replied. She died believing people could be better than their circumstances. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything they were both afraid to say. A sudden gust of wind lifted Ava's hair, and she shivered. Without thinking, Ethan shrugged off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders. She froze for a second, the warmth of the fabric carrying his scent, cedar, rain, and something she could not name. Thank you, she murmured. You are welcome. His voice was low, rougher than usual. You do not have to keep your guard up all the time, Ava. She turned to face him. Neither do you. His eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. It was not about the contract anymore. It was about two lonely people standing too close under a quiet sky, each one afraid of what might happen if they took a single step closer. Then, almost without thinking, he reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face. You should get some sleep, he said, his voice unsteady. We have another event tomorrow. Of course, she whispered, though neither of them moved. The tension hung there, fragile, real. When she finally turned to leave, Ethan called after her. Ava, he said. She stopped. For what it is worth, tonight you were the most genuine person in that entire ballroom. She smiled faintly, not trusting her voice to reply. In her room, she set the wooden box on the nightstand and stared at the ring on her finger. For the first time, it did not feel like a cage. Down the hall, Ethan stood alone on the balcony, watching the lights fade. He thought of her words, of kindness spent by the broke, and wondered when was the last time he had given anything that was not wrapped in a deal. In that quiet hour before dawn, both of them realized something they were not ready to admit out loud. The line between the contract and their hearts was starting to blur. The next morning, the illusion shattered. Ava woke to the sound of her phone buzzing non-stop. Dozens of missed calls, hundreds of messages, and a headline flashing across every screen, who is Ethan Hale's mystery bride? Someone had leaked photos from the gala, including the one of her kneeling to help a guest with the spilled wine. The internet was merciless. Gold digger, one headline read. Street barista turned billionaire's wife overnight, said another. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the comments, strangers dissecting her life, her dress, her worth. She felt exposed, small, and foolish for believing she could blend into Ethan's world unnoticed. Ethan was already in the study when she stormed in, her voice breaking. You said no one would find out. He looked up from the newspaper, eyes sharp but weary. I said we would manage it. We still can. Manage it, she repeated. They are tearing me apart out there. He rose slowly, setting the paper aside. Ava, calm down. Do not tell me to calm down, she snapped. You have a team to clean your name. I have no one. He flinched at that, his jaw tightening. You think I did this, that I wanted this attention? I think you do not care who gets burned as long as your company stays clean. The words came out before she could stop them. Silence fell between them, thick and sharp. Ethan's eyes darkened. You are not the only one risking something here, he said quietly. That merger you helped salvate is being questioned now. They think this marriage is a PR stunt. I could lose everything. At least you have something to lose, she whispered. I never did. She turned to leave, but he caught her arm, his grip gentle but firm. Ava, wait, do not, she said, pulling away. I signed a contract, Ethan. Not a confession. She walked out, slamming the door behind her. For the first time, Ethan did not follow. That night, he sat alone in the darkened study, the city lights flickering through the window. Victor, his rival and board member, had called earlier, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. She is ruining your reputation, Ethan. Maybe it is time to end the charade. Ethan had hung up without answering, but the words lingered like poison. Upstairs, Ava packed her small bag, tears blurring her vision. The wooden box sat on the bed, the silver key catching the lamplight. She hesitated, then tucked it into her coat pocket. 30 days, she whispered. That was the deal. As she stepped into the hallway, she caught a glimpse of Ethan at the bottom of the stairs, standing in the dim light, looking up at her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said quietly, if you walk out now, there is no going back. Maybe there never was, she replied, her voice breaking. She turned away before he could see her cry. The door closed softly behind her, but the echo of it lingered long after. Ethan stood there for a long time, staring at the empty staircase, realizing the one thing he had never accounted for: the contract could end, but what he felt for her could not. 3 days passed before the world learned the truth, and by then, Ava had vanished from the mansion. Reporters still camped outside the gates, hungry for scandal. Inside, Ethan Hale sat in his office surrounded by silence and consequence. His company's stock had dropped overnight. The board was restless. Victor, ever the vulture, stood at the head of the long conference table, smirking. I warned you, he said. That girl was a mistake. End the contract, announce the separation, and we might still salvage this. Ethan looked up, his tone calm but edged with steel. She has a name. Ava. And she was never the mistake. Victor scoffed. Then explain this. He tossed a file across the table. Inside were photos of Ava leaving the mansion, alongside an anonymous claim that she had stolen a family heirloom. Ethan's eyes darkened as he flipped the pages. You planted this. I protected our interests, Victor replied. Your little charity case is a liability. Ethan stood abruptly, the chair scraping back. Get out. Victor sneered. You are letting emotion ruin you, Hale. The board will see it soon enough. But Ethan was already dialing a number. Find her, he ordered his head of security. Quietly. Meanwhile, Ava sat in a small cafe downtown, the same one where she had worked before all of this began. The world outside buzzed with headlines she tried to ignore. Her reflection in the window looked different now, stronger, maybe sadder, but not broken. The wooden box sat beside her cup of coffee. She opened it slowly, running her fingers over the faded photo and the silver key. The barista, a friend from before, placed a muffin on her table. On the house, she said softly. You do not look okay. Ava smiled faintly. I will be. But the lie trembled on her lips. That afternoon, as she stepped outside, a black car pulled up to the curb. Ethan stepped out, rain glistening on his coat. He looked exhausted, haunted. You should not be here, she said. Neither should you, he replied. You were accused of stealing from me. Ava froze. What? Victor set you up, Ethan said. He leaked the story to push you out and collapse the merger. But I found the proof in my mother's old files. That key you kept, it unlocks her trust vault. Inside are documents showing Victor has been siphoning funds for years. Ava stared at him, disbelief and anger mixing with relief. You are telling me that the one thing I tried to save ended up saving you? Ethan took a slow breath. Seems so. She looked away. Why tell me? You have what you need. Because I am done pretending, Ava. I told the board everything. The contract. The truth. That I married you to protect a deal and that somewhere along the way, I stopped caring about the deal. Her eyes softened, her defenses faltering. What did they say? They voted to remove Victor and asked me to step down temporarily. But I do not care. I am here because I owe you my name back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out her ring. If you want out, you can have it back. If you want the truth, come to the press conference tomorrow. I am going to fix this, publicly. Ava looked at the ring, then at him. And if I do not? Then I will still tell the truth, he said. You saved my company once, Ava. Let me save your name. For the first time since she left, she believed him. The rain fell harder, blurring the world around them, but the way Ethan looked at her steady, unguarded cut through everything else. Tomorrow would decide if this was redemption or goodbye. The next morning, the press conference drew every reporter in the city. Cameras crowded the marble steps of Hale Industries as Ethan walked to the podium alone. He looked different now, no longer the untouchable billionaire, but a man stripped down to truth. The murmurs died as he began to speak. There has been speculation about my marriage and the woman I chose to stand beside me. I will make this clear. Ava Nguyen did not deceive me. I deceived her. I asked her to enter a contract marriage to protect a business merger. She agreed for her own reasons that had nothing to do with greed. Everything you have read about her is false. Reporters shouted questions, flashes blinding, but he raised a hand for silence. The real story is this. That woman reminded me that power means nothing without integrity. And real love cannot be negotiated. Behind him, a screen lit up, showing documents from the trust vault, the proof of Victor's embezzlement. Gasps filled the crowd. Security escorted Victor away as Ethan continued, the board has accepted my resignation. I have nothing to sell, no image to save. But I do have something worth fighting for. He paused, his voice softer. Ava, if you are watching this, thank you for saving me when I did not deserve it. Across town, Ava stood in the cafe, her hands trembling as she watched the live broadcast on the small television above the counter. The customers had gone quiet. When Ethan said her name, something in her chest broke open. By the time he finished, she was already running outside, the wooden box clutched to her chest. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Ethan stood on the rooftop of the old Hale Foundation building. The air was cool, the city bathed in gold. He turned at the sound of footsteps. Ava stood there, rain-soaked, breathless. You forgot this, she said, holding up the box. He smiled faintly. I was hoping you would bring it. She stepped closer, opening the lid. Inside was the photo of her mother, the silver key, and now the wedding ring, polished but still bearing the tiny scratch from the day they met. You kept it, she whispered. I kept everything that mattered, he said. Ava, I cannot promise a perfect life. But I can promise a real one. She looked up at him, eyes shining. No contracts this time? Just a choice, he said. Yours. For a moment, neither moved. Then she took his hand, the simplest answer in the world. The city lights flickered below as he slipped the ring onto her finger, the same one that had once felt like a cage but now felt like freedom. In the distance, the church bells began to ring late again, but somehow perfectly timed. Months later, at a quiet rooftop ceremony, they said their vows for real. No reporters, no board members, no deals, just promises whispered between two people who had already lived through their mistakes. As the night settled around them, Ava looked up at the stars and said softly, my mother was right. Kindness is a kind of currency. Ethan squeezed her hand, smiling. And you made me rich, Ava. In that moment, the world finally felt honest. Their story, once a contract, had become something real, proof that love built on truth could outlast every lie.